I've gone fishing alone more times than I can count, sometimes to get away from the noise of work, sometimes to clear my head after a bad week. But that one morning at Lake Marin, I swear to you, it was the first time in my life I ever felt like something out there didn't want me to leave. It happened last September. The weather had been cooling off fast, and that early morning fog that rolls off the lake every fall was thicker than I'd ever seen it. I left my truck parked on the gravel lot just after 5 in the morning when it was still pitch black outside. The only sounds were crickets and the faint slosh of the lake's edge against the rocks. Lake Marin was remote. No cabins, no rangers, no cell signal. Just miles of trees and water. I'd always liked that about it. But that day, for whatever reason, the stillness didn't feel peaceful. It felt heavy, like the silence itself was pressing down on me. I rowed my small aluminum boat out past the shoreline and set my lantern on the floor beside me. The light barely cut through the fog. It just glowed around me like a pale bubble, fading into white on all sides. It felt like floating in the middle of nothing. The air smelled wet, earthy, almost metallic. Every sound carried strangely. When I dropped the anchor, the splash echoed far longer than it should have. And somewhere, maybe 100 yards away, I thought I heard another splash, softer, slower, like something easing into the water. I stopped moving, listened. Nothing, just fog and the quiet lapping of water. I told myself it was probably a beaver or a fish breaking the surface. Still, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was just beyond sight, watching. I cast my line and tried to focus on the rhythm. The soft whir of the reel, the faint tapping of the lure against the water. Minutes passed, maybe half an hour. The fog grew thicker. Then I heard it again. A splash, this time closer. Not loud, but distinct, like a heavy object sinking just beneath the surface. It was maybe 20 feet behind me. I turned around fast, lantern light swinging. Nothing but white haze and dark ripples spreading slowly outward. The kind of movement water makes after something's just gone under. I waited, eyes straining, but there was no sign of anything. No fish, no bubbles, no debris. I told myself to relax. I'd been out there 100 times. Probably a turtle. Still, I couldn't shake the goosebumps running up my arms. I reeled in and cast again, this time toward the sound. But my line snagged almost immediately, as if something had grabbed it. I tugged once, twice. It held fast. Then suddenly it pulled back, hard. My heart skipped. I yanked again, thinking maybe it was a big fish. But the pull was strange, slow and steady, not jerky like a fish fight. It felt deliberate, like something on the other end was testing me. Then it stopped. The tension vanished. When I reeled my line in, the lure was gone, cleanly cut off, not snapped or frayed. The end of the line looked sliced. At that point, I laughed nervously. Told myself maybe it snagged on a sharp rock. But in that fog, even that didn't feel right. Rocks don't pull back. I tied a new lure, but as I reached down for my tackle box, I noticed something floating a few feet away, a shape in the mist, barely visible. It looked like a wooden plank at first, but as it drifted closer, I realized it wasn't floating. It was moving upright, slowly, as if something was holding it vertical beneath the surface. Then, as it came within a few feet of the boat, it tilted sideways and slipped silently under. I froze. The ripples spread toward me. For the first time that morning, I thought about heading back. But the shore was invisible now, just endless gray in every direction. I couldn't even tell which way I'd come from. That's when I heard it. Faint but clear. A splash. Then another, and another, getting closer each time. It wasn't random. It sounded like footsteps in the water, circling. I grabbed my oar, trying to see through the fog, but every direction looked the same. Then I heard something brush the side of the boat. A slow scrape, like fingernails trailing across the aluminum hull. I held still, breath caught in my throat. The scraping stopped. Then, 3 soft knocks. Tap, tap, tap. I stared down over the edge, but the fog distorted everything. Even my reflection looked warped. The water was too dark to see beneath. I don't know how long I stayed frozen there before finally whispering to myself, "Enough. I'm going back." I reeled in my line, pulled the anchor, and started rowing. Slow at first, then faster. But no matter how far I rowed, the fog didn't thin. The air grew colder. My breaths came out like smoke. And then, another splash, right behind me. This one loud. I turned, expecting to see maybe a fish or a fallen branch. Instead, something broke the surface about 15 feet away, tall and thin, just for a second before sinking again. I couldn't make out details, only that it wasn't an animal I recognized. The water churned where it had gone under, then went still. I started rowing harder than I ever had in my life. My arms burned, my chest ached, but the water around me moved. It started rippling, not from my oars, but from something else, circling, closing in. I could hear it now, the faint sound of water sloshing against something large, moving just under the surface. Once or twice, I thought I saw a shape beneath the boat, long and pale, gliding silently. When I finally saw the faint outline of the dock through the fog, I almost cried. But just as I reached for my rope to tie off, the boat jerked violently to the side. Something had hit it from underneath. I dropped the rope and fell backward. The lantern toppled over, light flaring, then dying out with a hiss as it hit the water. For a moment, I sat in total darkness. The sound of the lake around me, the boat rocking back and forth. Then, from somewhere behind me, I heard a voice. It was low, distorted, like someone trying to speak underwater. "Help! Me!" I froze. It was so close, maybe a few feet away. But when I looked, there was nothing, just fog. "Please, help!" The voice came again, softer. Gurgling, I could hear water bubbling between each word. That's when I saw it. A hand, pale, bloated, reaching just above the surface beside the boat. I yelled, stumbled backward, nearly tipping over. But when I looked again, the hand was gone, leaving only small ripples that spread out into the mist. I rowed the last few yards to shore so fast I could barely feel my arms. When the boat scraped against the gravel, I didn't even bother tying it up. I jumped out and ran for the truck. I didn't look back once. The fog behind me seemed to move like it was alive. When I slammed the door shut and tried to start the engine, it stalled twice before finally catching. As I pulled out, headlights cutting through the haze, I swear I saw someone standing at the edge of the water, completely still, just watching me leave. The next day, when the fog cleared, I went back with a friend to retrieve my boat. It was still there, half pulled onto shore, but the hull was dented, with deep, narrow scratches along the bottom, like something with claws or jagged edges had scraped it. I haven't gone back to Lake Merin since, but sometimes when I drive past on foggy mornings, I see that same pale shape drifting near the shore, just far enough away that I can't make out what it is. And every time, I swear I can hear faint splashing in the distance, like footsteps walking across the water. This happened back in 2017, when I was 23. At the time, I lived in a small lakeside town in northern Michigan, the kind of place where there's more water than land and almost every family owns at least one boat. My best friend Kyle and I used to spend nearly every summer weekend fishing. But this one night changed that completely. There was a spot about 15 minutes outside of town called Miller's Dock, an old half-rotted wooden pier that stretched out into a narrow lake, arms surrounded by pine forest. It wasn't a public dock, technically, but no one cared if you used it. The locals said the property owner died years ago, and the place had just been sitting there since. It was the perfect spot for night fishing. Quiet, secluded, no light pollution, and good catfish. Kyle loved that kind of stuff. He was always pushing for the creepiest locations, saying it made fishing more fun. I wasn't exactly thrilled, but I went along. We got there around 9:30 p.m., late enough for the water to look like a sheet of glass. The moon was bright, almost full, and you could see steam rising where the cool night air met the lake. We parked Kyle's truck at the dirt pull-off and walked down the overgrown trail, carrying our rods, lanterns, and a small cooler. The dock creaked with every step. The boards were warped, uneven, and damp from the lake mist, but we'd fished there before and never had any problems. We set up near the end of the dock, dropped our lines, and settled in. It was one of those calm nights where you can hear everything. The gentle splash of water against the posts, the distant hoot of an owl, the buzz of insects just out of lantern light. For a while, it was peaceful. We talked about random things, work, old friends, stuff like that. Then Kyle said, "You ever notice how quiet this place gets after midnight?" I looked up. He was right. The woods were silent. No frogs, no crickets, nothing. Just still air and faint ripples on the water. Maybe the temperature dropped, I said. But even as I said it, something about the silence made me uneasy. It was around 12:15 when it happened. Kyle had just reeled in a small catfish when I heard something faint. A splash. Not big, not violent. Just enough to make both of us look up. It came from the left side of the dock, maybe 20 feet away. We shined our flashlights toward it, but all we saw were soft ripples fading into darkness. Then another splash, closer. Almost under the dock this time. Kyle grinned, thinking maybe a big one was lurking near the posts. "Bet there's something huge down there," he said, leaning over with his light. But before he could drop his line, I heard something else. A voice. It was faint, like someone whispering under the dock. At first I thought it was just the water, echoing weirdly, but then it came again. "Help!" It was a woman's voice. Soft, wet, muffled. Kyle froze. "You heard that too, right?" I nodded, shining my flashlight between the boards. The lake was black beneath us. I couldn't see more than a foot down. Then it came again, louder this time. "Please, help me." It sounded like it was right beneath us. Kyle stood up fast, looking around. "Hey, who's out there?" he yelled. No response. Just the sound of water gently slapping the dock supports. He knelt down and shouted again. "If someone's in the water, call out." Silence. Then, after a few seconds, another whisper. "I'm cold." I felt my stomach drop. The voice was directly under us now. So close it sounded like it was rising through the gaps in the planks. We both crouched, shining our flashlights through the cracks. But there was nothing there, just black water, moving slowly in rhythm with the waves. Then I heard something, soft, like fingers, brushing the underside of the dock. A slow, dragging scrape that moved from one end to the other. Kyle swore and stepped back. "What the hell is that?" The scraping stopped. Then a small tap against one of the wooden posts. Another, then another, like someone knocking. "Maybe it's a branch or something," I said, but I didn't believe that for a second. The knocks were too deliberate, too rhythmic. Then the voice spoke again. "Can you see me?" It was barely above a whisper, but it made every hair on my body stand on end. The sound came from right beside my boot, under the boards. Kyle pointed his flashlight down between two planks, and for a split second I saw something. A pale face, just below the surface. Eyes open, mouth moving. Then it slipped backward. disappearing silently into the dark water. Kyle screamed. The flashlight slipped from his hand and fell into the lake with a splash, its beam twisting beneath the surface before fading out. He grabbed my arm, eyes wide. "Did you see that?" I could barely talk. Yeah, I saw it." We both stood there frozen, staring into the water. Then, a thump shook the dock. It came from directly below us, strong enough to rattle the boards. Then another, and another. It felt like something massive was pushing up against the underside. The whole dock swayed. Kyle dropped his fishing pole and shouted, "Screw this, let's go!" He grabbed the lantern, and we started running back toward shore. The boards creaked and groaned under our weight, but halfway down I heard it again. The voice, now louder, coming from behind us. "Don't leave me." It sounded angry now, gurgling like it was choking on water. Then came a splash so loud it echoed through the trees. We turned, just in time to see a pale arm rise out of the lake, gripping one of the dock posts. It was gray-white, bloated, veins visible even in the dim light. The fingers twitched, nails scraping against the wood. Then, slowly, another hand surfaced beside it. I don't think I've ever run so fast in my life. We tore through the woods, branches hitting our faces, hearts pounding. We didn't stop until we reached the truck. Kyle fumbled with the keys, hands shaking. When he finally got it started, we peeled out of there, tires spitting gravel. Neither of us spoke the entire drive home. The next day, we told the sheriff's office what we'd seen, or at least part of it. We left out the whispering, the hands, all that. We just said we thought someone might have fallen in. They went out to check Miller's dock that afternoon. When the deputy came back, he said they didn't find anyone. No footprints, no sign of a struggle, nothing. But they did find something strange. A set of deep gouges along the underside of one of the dock posts, like fingernails dragging down wet wood. He told us it was probably an animal, maybe a raccoon or otter. We didn't argue. Kyle moved to Ohio a year later for work. He still fishes all the time, just not at night. As for me, I can't even walk near a dock anymore without remembering that voice. Because sometimes, when I'm near the water alone, I swear I still hear it. That same soft whisper, barely audible under the wind. Help me. I've been a fisherman my whole life. My dad used to say it teaches patience, that fishing is less about catching and more about learning to wait. But what happened 3 summers ago taught me something else entirely. That sometimes, when you wait long enough, something out there starts waiting for you. It was late July, and the weather in Maine had been brutal. Hot, muggy, the kind of heat that makes the air feel thick. To escape it, I decided to take my small motorboat out on Holt Reservoir. It was a quiet place, surrounded by forest, no tourists, no noise, just water, trees, and silence. I'd been there dozens of times before, usually with my brother. But he'd moved away, and that day I went alone. The plan was simple. Head out before dawn, fish until noon, and head back before the afternoon storms. I packed light, tackle box, a small cooler, and my old rod. I pushed the boat off around 5 a.m., when the lake was still wrapped in mist. The air was cool and the surface looked like glass. The only sounds were the hum of the motor and the occasional loon call, echoing from somewhere across the reservoir. I cut the engine near the middle, dropped anchor, and started setting up. Everything felt perfect, calm, quiet, like I had the entire world to myself. For a while, I didn't get any bites. Then, around 6:30, the line twitched. It was faint at first, then stronger. I smiled, thinking I'd finally hooked something worth the early trip. I pulled gently, letting it fight a bit before reeling in. But the resistance was strange, not jerky like a fish. It felt slow, deliberate, like something heavy was being dragged through mud. Then the line went slack. Whatever it was, it had let go. I reeled in, expecting to see my bait gone, but instead the hook was bent, like it had been pulled against something solid. I frowned, fixed a new hook, and cast again. Same direction, same depth. A few minutes later, the line tugged again, harder this time. It nearly pulled the rod from my hands. Gotcha, I muttered, tightening my grip and bracing my legs. But as I pulled back, the line pulled back harder. It wasn't a fish. I knew that immediately. No fish moves like that, steady, heavy, dragging. It felt like whatever was on the other end was pulling me. The boat started to drift, even though the anchor was down. I leaned forward and tried to reel it in, but the spool wouldn't budge. The line was taut as a wire. Then I heard it. A faint creaking sound. The line was stretching, fibers straining. I reached for my knife to cut it before it snapped, but then the tension eased. The line went slack again. I waited 5 seconds, 10. Nothing. Then, without warning, the rod jerked down so hard it slammed against the edge of the boat. The reel screamed as the line tore out. I clutched the handle with both hands, but the pull was so strong it nearly dragged me forward. Whatever was on the other end wasn't a fish. It felt like something massive, or like the lake itself was swallowing the line. Then, just as suddenly as it started, it stopped. Dead still. I froze, panting. The air around me was completely silent. Even the birds had gone quiet. I reeled in slowly, heart pounding. About halfway through, I felt resistance again. Something heavy, unmoving. When it finally broke the surface, I realized what it was. A piece of cloth. Dark, tangled, slimy. Like a shredded tarp or old clothing. It dripped with black water as I lifted it out, the smell immediately making me gag. It stank of rot and iron. I held it at arm's length, trying to shake it loose. But then I saw it. Underneath the folds, something pale, like a piece of skin. I dropped it instantly. The cloth sank with a wet slap, disappearing under the boat. The water around me rippled outward, slow and wide, like something big had shifted below. I decided that was enough for the day. But as I reached to pull the anchor, I noticed something strange. The line was moving again. Not the one I'd been fishing with, but the anchor rope. It was tightening, pulling downward. Hard. At first I thought it was snagged on a rock. I tugged, nothing. Then the rope pulled back. The boat tilted slightly to the side. I nearly lost balance. "Okay, what the hell?" I muttered, grabbing the knife again. As I leaned over to cut the rope, I saw bubbles rising. Big ones, breaking the surface right beside the boat. The water churned like something was coming up. Then, silence. Everything still. I waited a few seconds, knife ready, before slicing through the rope. The boat bounced back level, drifting free. I pulled the motor cord once, twice. It sputtered, then died. I tried again. Still nothing. That's when I heard the sound. A tapping, faint at first, coming from underneath the boat. Like someone knocking. 3 slow taps, then pause, then 3 again. I sat frozen, staring down. The water was black and still. Then a scrape, long and sharp, like nails dragging along metal. Something was underneath me. I moved to the other side of the boat, trying not to make a sound. The tapping followed. Same rhythm, same place, directly beneath my feet. Then I heard something else. A low sound, too soft to be words, but too deliberate to be noise. It almost sounded like someone murmuring underwater. I tried the motor again, nothing. So I grabbed the oar and started paddling toward shore, keeping my eyes on the water. But after only a few strokes, I noticed something trailing behind me. Faint ripples, keeping perfect pace with the boat. Something was following. Every time I stopped paddling, the ripples stopped too. Then, just as the shoreline came into view, the boat jerked backward violently. It felt like something had grabbed it from underneath. I was thrown against the seat, almost losing my balance. The oar fell into the water. I looked down just in time to see a hand break the surface, pale, thin, gripping the side of the boat. It wasn't like a normal hand. The fingers were too long, the skin bloated, like it had been underwater for days. The nails were dark, the knuckles bent at odd angles. I kicked at it instinctively, and it vanished beneath the water. Then, a moment later, two hands surfaced, grabbing the edge, pulling down hard. The boat lurched sideways, water spilling in. I screamed, kicking and shoving, trying to pry them off, but they didn't let go. For a brief moment, I saw something rise just beneath the surface. A face, pale and featureless, eyes open but hollow. Then it sank again, dragging the boat with it. Water flooded in fast. I grabbed my cooler and swung it at the hands. One let go, the other didn't. It held until my fingers brushed the knife still lying near the seat. I grabbed it and stabbed downward, not even thinking. The grip loosened. The hand slipped beneath the surface, leaving only ripples behind. The boat rocked violently, then silence. I sat there, shaking, drenched, knife in hand, waiting for something else to happen. Nothing did. When I finally restarted the motor, it caught on the first try. I didn't look back once on the ride to shore. The police didn't believe me when I told them what happened. They said I probably snagged debris, maybe an old net or something. When I showed them the bent hook and the shredded anchor rope, they said it must have been rocks or current pressure, but I know what I saw. And 2 days later, when a search team went out after another fisherman went missing on the same lake, they found his boat, empty, engine idling, floating in the same area I'd been. There were deep scratches along the sides. And the anchor rope? It was missing, torn clean off. I haven't gone fishing since that day. But sometimes when I can't sleep, I hear that sound again in my head. The faint tapping from beneath the boat. Slow, rhythmic, like something still waiting down there, just beneath the surface, for another line to bite.